What's that, honey?
We're open and it freaked me out.
So, hey, YouTube, Petey here, and I've been playing around with this. I bought a interface, an audio interface, M Audio. It's like a half rack size box, and it's called the 410. So there's two jacks on the back that say input, and there's two front panel that are big. You can either plug in XLR jack or quarter inch. This thing's covered with switches and LEDs. You turn it around, it's all solid jacks. There's 8 outputs, and it's got all this complicated mixing software with auxiliaries and sends. So I go to set it up today, and I'm thinking, well, what we can do is, since it's running on the computer, and there's 2 headphone jacks dedicated with volume knobs. Now, one of the problems I have is it's too loud. That problem, where I've had this family band making music with my kids and my wife, and having to have one volume that is, you can't even measure it. It's so quiet. And another one that's many, many, many hundreds of decibels for me, because I like my stuff loud, really loud, like right where it's pain on like a jet airplane taking off. That's how loud my headphones are. So in the other room, we have a whole area that's set up with rack mount gear, computers, a Fostex board, a mixer that the whole family can play along with. This Alesis SR18, which is the latest drum machine that they made. Sounds really good. We've got, everyone has stereo compression and gate. We're all stereo. There's outboard multi-effects, dedicated reverb unit, quad reverb. There's an old Digitech multi-effect. Then there's inside the board has effects that sound even better. And I have a rack. There's 28 pedals for me. The rack has compression, and then there's an interface that goes to a computer to run amplitude. My daughter has a Boss GT6. My other daughter runs a Yamaha. I think it's a synthesizer. It's like a circa mid-90s, like a rave dance electro synth that has all the normal GM MIDI sound set. So it's decent gear that we have there. It's not Casios and homemade foot pedals. We use amp modeling, and so it sounds really good when we jam in there all together. We have rack mount headphone amp that has 4 stereo channels, and everyone has their own pair of expensive headphones. We usually use Sony MDR-3506, the $120 Sennheisers. I've got a pair of Superlux HD330s, which are cheap. They're like 30, 35, but man, they're I think they're a 50 millimeter diaphragm. They're huge, and they sound just, they're the best headphones I've ever heard. And so my point is, we've got a really unique line-in setup that really sounds fantastic in the other room. But we made music in that room with our kids for 5 years straight with the same 100-song set list, and kind of burnt out on it. So my wife and I set up a mini rig in here where I've got my little Zoom next to me. She's got her Zoom B2. She's got a B1 and a B2. And what happened was, I found an M Audio, just a single monitor. On the back of it, there's an AC switch to go from Europe 220 or United States 110. And that switch somehow had been moved in the middle where it wasn't making contact. So I tried to fire up this monitor. I couldn't get the light to come on. And I was removing the screws from the back panel to look at it to see, is there a dead fuse inside of this thing, when I noticed that switch. And I moved the switch over to 110, plugged it in, and the light came on. So you can imagine my embarrassment using a screwdriver that fits on my keychain to try to get all these big screws out of there. It was killing me. And I got like 9 out of the 12 out of it when I realized it was a switch. So I'm like, what are we going to do with this one monitor? You know, mixing everything in mono like Brian Wilson, because I don't even have a pair of monitors. So the answer to that question was, we run on our single RCA cable mono out of each one of our multi-effects. I built a MP3 unit that runs on lithium-ion batteries that has a TIFF card or a SD card. So we put the drum beats, I make drum loops, put those on the card, and then that pops into this little box MP3 player that I made. So 2 channels come out of that and run in. I got a little 4-channel mixer. It's an old Fostex 9-volt powered battery mixer. It sounds good enough for rock and roll. So our drum loops come into that, and it's mono. And then our mono B2 processed bass, mono G1. And then that goes right down to this. Actually, I put a tube preamp in between there. But anyway, that's our practice setup. And it sounds so much better than you would think it does from how I'm describing it. But it's a really good monitor, I guess. That M Audio it's a good monitor. And these multi-effects are good as well. So it sounds really good. Now, the downside of that is when you're playing bass, even on, I think it's a 4.5-inch speaker, but it's ported well and it's really a good speaker. It's enough to let the neighbors can hear it. In this building, you can hear it. So ultimately, with this new interface, my mind is going, and I'm seeing there's 2 headphone jacks, one high and one low. Low for her, lower volume, turn it down, and then me, I can crank it up. We use the computer as the MP3, just Windows Media Player, play, you know, and then just have the line coming in out of this 410, use those both of those inputs. So I got everything set up with my side, and then I went to plug in the front panel for her, and I get nothing. And what it is it isn't a 4x10. It's a 2x10. You have to hit a switch, either the front jacks or the back jacks for the input. As I said, there's XLR or 1/4 inch on the front, and then 1/4 inch for the input. There's an input on the back, a set of them. 2 inputs on the back, 2 inputs on the front. But you have to hit a switch and pick either or, which I had no idea when I bought it. And this is what I call bad design. This is shiesty marketing, and this is all the time, unless you get the top thing. It's always like, oh, here's this thing. And they even call it a 410. Why do you call it a 410? It's a 210. There's 2 inputs on it. Well, you know how they call it a 410? It has SPDIF. It has Toslink. On the back, there's a little port for you to plug in a Toslink or a SPDIF, a light pipe, one of those fiber optic cables. And then there's also an RCA jack, because you can do that. They do that Toslink over RCA as well. So I guess it's a little cheaper to give you a digital in than a pair of, or make those. I mean, it was designed for an extra set of outputs on the back and in the front, but nope. And this is what you run into all the time in the world, is you have to read the fine print, because they'll make you think it's one thing. It's like Neil Young says, they give you this, but you paid for that. It's so true. And I couldn't believe it, because I really was patting myself on the back about this interface, how great it sounds. I run those cheap, I know they're horrible junker, probably making it worse. ART, Tube MP Studio, their little tube preamp thing with the 12AX7. I run that in front of it, but this is what I use to record Minor Technical Difficulties, the album that came out last February, and Digitally Delayed, the album that came out this February. And I paid $30 for the interface. It was $6 to get the FireWire card for this computer, and I had the FireWire front card for the other computer, and I rounded up some cables from Goodwill for like $1 a piece for the FireWire cables. I started hoarding those. Every time I would see one, I would buy one. So I'll probably spend another 5 or 6 on, and then I've got a bunch of light pipe cables here. So I looked up on eBay China, and they've got a bunch of digital analog DACs. They got little boards, and they've got some that are plastic chassis, and most of those they go the other way around. They want you to come in with the light pipe and then go out analog. You know, they're thinking most people have that toss link, and they can't hook it up to their amp. So that's the common thing. The weird thing, what I'm trying to do is take an analog signal, take an RCA cable, a pair of them, and pop it into digital land, and then run it out through the light pipe into this toss link. And that's what I'm going to do. It was like $7, and then I clicked on it and bought it, and then up it came up, there's $2.50 shipping. But there's nothing I can do. What am I going to do? I've got a interface with two inputs on it, and I can double that by spending another $10 and adding a clunky thing that has to be powered by 5 volts. So I'm going to do it, and then that way, well, like I said, we'll be able to pipe her bass in on those other channels, and then I've already got my guitar all set up on it. I can run it off this multi-effector that sits here that has my presets for everything we already play. So I bought some 1/4 inch to 1/8 inch adapters and some braided 1/8 inch cable, like a 5-meter extension cord. So she likes to sit on a stool over a couple feet on the other side. Maybe she could even sit next to me, but I on the sofa and relax. But we're gonna need to get some cables, so it's kind of expensive for me. I'm trying not to spend any money. So this is like 10 for the interface, and then a couple bucks here for the adapters, a couple bucks for cables. I got me a cable. I didn't get me a cable, but we need one to run from her bass processor to the toss link, which is 9 feet. And all that stuff's just like $1 a piece if you get it on eBay China. If I were to go to Best Buy, a cable like that's going to be like $7.95 at least, if I'm lucky. The 25-foot cable is going to be $15 if they have one. So if you're watching this video and you've never bought anything off of eBay China, I would suggest you start doing that. You know, just go in there. You gotta type. You know, you gotta watch what you type. Don't necessarily type in three like 1/8 inch extension cable. Just type in 3.5 and cable and see what you get, because they don't always. They got a language barrier. You can, like the real cheap guys, they never call it what it really is. So sometimes you can find it. You know, you can save like $0.25. Which, hey, if you're buying 3 of them, you know, to me that's 3 picks. Because I buy my picks in bulk too. Actually, I got 100 picks for $1 is the deal I've been getting them on eBay China. That's the way to go. And I know you're gonna Donald Trump me, and you're gonna, you know, F you me, buy American and all that. Well, you know what? I worked so hard in this country, and all I ever got was nothing but heartbreak. Never had any savings. I busted my ass. Okay, they're unbelievably physical jobs to the point where I broke my back, and then I got kicked to the curb, and they won't give me disability. So what the fuck am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to keep myself sane with the amount of pain that I deal with? And now we got an opioid epidemic, so we got to, you know, Jones me out on that too. The only thing I can do to keep myself sane is make this fucking music, and nothing's gonna stop me from doing that. And it sucks that I can't go down. I should have a house with a basement. I shouldn't happen to be buying headphone extension cables. I'm 50 fucking years old. But that's not the way it panned out for me. So I can't buy American. And that sucks. But it's not going to stop me. So yeah, the lesson for today that I learned is don't ever buy anything unless you read the manual You know, I mean, it said 410 on it, and I was convinced that I could do this. This was part of the plan when I bought it. Was eventually, you know, you're going to be jamming through this thing just to use Windows as a virtual mixer. You know, and you know, I found a stereo mini mixer that is 6 channels. It's an M Audio MIDI Sport mini mixer, and it's got 6 or 8 channels, and I think it's just 6. Volume and pan on each channel, and then there's a master volume and a master pan or something, and 2/4 inch out, and then it's just covered, just a little box covered in knobs, you know, pretty much, and then it's 9-volt AC input, not DC AC, but I bet you it would run off of DC. I bet you it would. So I've got that, and I could set that up here, and everything would be fine, but then there's no headphone amp. So I got to run it down to an amp, and then we've got one amp that I'm turning up real loud. So I would have to have a cable that has a volume control on it to turn her down, to put a splitter on it. And that messes with the impedance, and it's probably not good for the amp. I would rather buy a separate headphone amp that has 2 separate volume controls, and I've looked at those. You can get those. The ones that have the separate volume controls are more money. So this way, like I said, I think I'm gonna have a little bit better sound than with that mini mixer idea, and then trying to futz around with the goofy impedance. 2 different volumes, you know. I mean, really, the best thing to do would be for me to build a buffer box that splits off that input and doubles it, which would mean it would clone the output of that mixer. Okay, so it'd basically be 2 JFETs, so it'd be like a little buffer amp, and then I would put 2 outputs on one output on 2 outputs, 2 on each channel, and run one output to a dedicated headphone amp for her, and then the other output run to a big clunker amp, and plug me into that big, like Kenwood or Jensen, whatever amp I've got down here that I've schemed from Goodwill, and then crank me up on the high power thing, and she would run off of a smaller, you know, little 12 volt whatever circuit, because they've got those headphone amp circuits. They're like $8 and they come with a little clear kit, little clear case. You can build them. So I've thought this through, and I know a lot of people are going to go, well, why don't you just get that? I've thought every way through, believe me. I know it sounds goofy when I'm trying to use Windows as a mixer, but my computer's always on, except for when I sleep, and I'm not so much scared to try to fuck with it to make it do what it's not trying to do. Which that's exactly what we're doing in this case with this stupid fucking M Audio thing. I can't believe that SPDIF. This is a Project Studio interface, and they call it a 410. And 2 of your inputs, the only way you can get in is through a toss link. Like nobody, So yeah, I'm sure that there are people that have these that went and bought the same thing that I have, so they could use that other input. And I know it'll work. There's no question on my mind that it'll work. So surprise, surprise if it doesn't. I just it kind of sucks for me when I make these things, because most of the time when I talk about this stuff and I get worked up and I talk about not wanting to spend money or how it's shitty the companies do stuff like this, I call it a 410. Just call it a 210 and say, yeah, on the bonus you get SPDIF. Or spend the extra money in production to make it an actual 410 and have the inputs on the rear actual functional, not something that you toggle on and off with the switch. That's ridiculous, you know. I mean, I guess it makes sense. You run some microphones in the front, and then you run line in coming out of the board in the back, because there's phantom power on the front port, and then toggle them. But that whole toggling thing that you can't really use it, I didn't know that. I assumed that they were separate inputs. So it just sucks for me, because when I talk about this stuff, oftentimes I get that response of, why don't you do this? Why don't you just do that? Like I didn't think to do what you're telling me to do. Of course I thought of it. I don't sleep because of stuff like this. This type of stuff keeps me up at night. And I think of every possible way to work through it. So it's not me being hostile towards anybody. It's just the fact that I would never go up to somebody and suggest they do something that way. I used to be like that. And I really worked on myself as I got older to stop trying to be a know-it-all. Because nobody likes a know-it-all. So that's just something else you can take away from this. Anyway, you guys, peace, and look forward to more music. I'm gonna be. I put up that what's it called? Pilfered. I put up that Pilfered. I'm gonna be hopefully doing some more music and some more demos before next year. I'm gonna try to do more now that I've got this thing set up where it's easy to get at and easy for me to do. Well, hopefully I'll have some more stuff for you. So anyway, take care.